Eternal death, the result of delay. A young man by the name of Smith was seen standing looking on with interest during the exercises of a prayer meeting at camp meeting in Rootstone, Ohio. One of the ministers observing him addressed him on the subject of religion. His eyes filled with tears, and he seemed inclined to seek religion. One of his wicked companions, perceiving it, stepped up and looking him in the face, remarked, "Smith, I would not be a fool." Poor Smith could not resist such influences, and dashing the tears from his eyes, turned on his heel and went away. He lingered about the campground until the meeting closed for the evening and went off with his companion. They battered him on the subject of his feelings, to show to them that he had not the feelings they supposed. He commenced cursing and blaspheming in the most awful manner, and making all the imaginable sport of religious things, when a large limb from a tree fell on him, and he, with a curse on his tongue, was forced into the presence of God, whom had thus been blaspheming, without one moment's warning. I am in the flames. Pull me out. Pull me out. Mr. Williams, the subject of this narrative, died in New York about the year 1883 at the age of 74. He was an avowed infidel. He was a good neighbor in some respects, yet he was very wicked and made a scoff of Christianity. About 7 years previous to his death, he passed through a revival. The Spirit strove with him, but he resisted to the last. One Sabbath after this, Mr. Nick, who relates this sketch, was on his way to church and passed Mr. Williams' house, who was standing by the gate. He said, "Come with me to church, Mr. Williams." The infidel, holding out his hand, replied, "Show me a hair on my palm of my hand, and I will show you a Christian." During his last sickness, Mr. Nick called on him often, and sat up with him with several nights, and was with him when he died. The infidel was conscious of his near approaching end and of the terrors of his lost condition. He said once to Mr. Nick, who as a local worker held meetings in schoolhouses around, "Warn the world not to live as I have lived, and escape my woe." At another time, when visited by a doctor, he was groaning and making demonstrations of great agony. The doctor said, "Why do you groan? Your disease, is it not painful?" "Oh, doctor," said he, "it is not the body, but the soul that troubles me." On the evening of his death, Mr. Nick came at 10 o'clock. A friend of his was there also. As he entered the room, he felt that it was filled with an awful presence, as if he were near the region of the damned. The dying man cried out, "Oh God, deliver me from that awful pit." It was not a prayer, but a wail of a soul. About 15 minutes before his death, which was at 12, he exclaimed, "I am in the flames. Pull me out, pull me out." He kept repeating this until the breath left his body. As the bodily strength failed, his voice became more faint. At last, Mr. Nick put his ear down close to catch his departing whispers, and the last words he could hear were, "Pull me out, pull me out." "It was an awful scene," said he. "It made an impression on me that I can never forget. I never want to witness such a scene again." I was talking with my friend years after, and he said those words, "I am in the flames, pull me out," were still ringing his ears. I have neglected the salvation of my soul. About 20 years ago, while we were doing some evangelistic work, early one morning, a little boy with a very sad heart called at our room, saying that his mother was dying and wished to see us. We hurried to Mrs. Betty's home, and as we opened the door, we beheld a sorrowful sight, a woman in despair. The expression on her face and the sad look in her eyes told of great agony. We were at loss to know just what to say or do. Our heart was full. We said to her, "You are in great pain." With a wild look, she replied, "Yes, I'm in great pain, but that is nothing compared with the thought of going to meet God unprepared. What is this physical suffering compared to the remorse of conscience and dark future before me?" Then she cried out in agony, "All is vanity, all is vanity. I have lived for myself and tried to find pleasure at the dance and other places of amusement. I have neglected the salvation of my soul. I am unprepared to meet God. Pray for me, oh, pray for me." While we prayed, she responded, "Amen, amen. God help me. What shall I do? Is there any hope for a poor sinner like me?" And many other similar expressions. Her ungodly husband cried bitterly while she told of their past sinful life. Her heart was hardened with sin, and her ears were dull of hearing, and her eyes too blind to see the light of God. Her friends were coming in from the village and surrounded the country to see her die. As they entered the room, she would take each one of them by the hand and plead with them not to follow her example, not to live as she had lived. Holding an uncle by the hand, a man deep in sin, who seemed to be far from God, and said, "Uncle, prepare to meet your God. Don't wait until you come to your dying day, as I have done. When you plow your ground, pray. When you plant your corn, pray. When you cultivate the same, pray. Whatever you do, pray." She died in the month of May, the season for corn planting. Many of her friends wept and promised to live better lives. Her mental agony was so far beyond her physical pain that she seemed to be unconscious of her intense bodily suffering. Her sins seemed to loom up before as a great mountain, hiding from her the presence and love of God. As long as she was able to speak, she prayed and requested others to do so. In a few hours, the voice that had been pleading so pitifully for mercy and warning others by the example of her ungodly life was hushed in the silence of death. The pastor of the Methodist Church, whom we were helping, preached at her funeral. As we listened to his words of warning, we resolved as never before to further our efforts in warning lost humanity to flee from the wrath to come. Soon after her death, we called on her husband and reminded him of his wife's dying testimony and urged him to attend the revival meetings that we were holding in town. But he seemed to be full of prejudice against Christianity and gave us no encouragement, and still continued to walk in the same sinful path as before. We trust that our readers will take warning by the sad experience related in this sketch. God help us all to redeem the time as we see eternity drawing near. Amen.